So, a big topic in the world today has been global warming and ozone depletion. And a lot of people don't really know what's going on with the topic, so we're here to inform you. Now, the biggest thing, or one of the biggest things, is the Earth's natural climate fluctuation. Adam's here to tell you a little bit about that.
Alright, first off, the average temperature of the Earth has naturally increased and decreased over time. The temperature has started to increase though during warm periods.
And these periods of warm and cold periods, a warm period is what you call an interglacial period. That's when the Earth is I guess I should have started with glacial period. A glacial period is a cold period in the Earth where the average temperature is very low and most of the Earth is, well, there's a lot of glaciers present, obviously, and the current trend that we're in right now would be a interglacial period. We're coming out of a glacial period as the temperature has been going up, and as you can see, there's not very many glaciers left on Earth, so another thing that would really represent that we're not in the glacial period.
We are now here to talk to you about factors that affect climate. One factor that affects climate are solar rays. An increase in solar rays cools the Earth by forming more thick, umbrella-like clouds. However, a decrease would warm the Earth, forming high, thin clouds.
Another factor that affects the Earth's climate is albedo. Albedo is the reflectivity of a surface. So something like ice that has a high albedo is going to reflect more UV radiation, thus cooling the Earth. But something like the ocean with a low albedo is going to absorb a lot more UV radiation and heat the Earth. So as the Earth heats up and there's less ice, there's going to be less albedo, which means there's going to be a lot more, the surface temperature is going to rise.
A third factor that affects climate are oceans. Oceans absorb solar radiation and heat, which rises the surface temperature.
Water vapor is also another factor. Water vapor is a greenhouse gas, so it's going to trap radiation and heat in the atmosphere and thus heat up the Earth.
Air pollutants are a crucial factor that affects climate. Air pollutants contribute to global warming as they pump more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere.
Photosynthesis is a big thing that can really remove CO2 from the atmosphere because it uses CO2, it takes in CO2. Well, plants do when they use photosynthesis. They take in CO2, so they remove it from the atmosphere, which is going to thus cool the Earth because it's taking out that greenhouse gas. So if we really planted a lot more plants, there'd be a lot more CO2 coming out of the atmosphere. A vastly changing climate is going to rise with many concerns because we have such a big population in the world today. One of these concerns is going to be death and illness. Now, in places like Africa and developing countries and poorer countries, these death and illness rates are going to greatly increase because these countries don't have access to things like air conditioning and also the basic medical attention they need.
On the other hand, fewer people would be dying from cold weather. Death rates are about 20% higher in the winter, and in the United States, there are about twice as many deaths caused by cold than from heat.
Increased temperature is also going to really make extreme weather much stronger, like hurricanes and tornadoes and stuff like that. So as these storms get stronger, and with the population being so big, more people are going to be affected every time the storm happens. So as the storms get more extreme, there's going to be more death and more turmoil and more destruction.
Hey Marcel, did you know global warming has many effects?
In fact, Adam, global warming really affect water distribution because some areas might get more precipitation, some will get less. And, this would really affect an environment, especially with how animals and humans would get water.
You know what? Deserts would also expand as droughts become more severe in some areas, especially parts of Africa and Asia.
Global warming would also affect how, it would also make biomes shift and overall water sources. So, animals and plants that would have to adapt to these new climate changes and environment changes. And, some might not be able to adapt as quickly as they need to, so they would become extinct and die off. And they would also, someone might migrate to new areas. So some areas might have a lot of animals and plants, some might have a little bit. And, this would really disrupt the overall humans' food sources and also a lot of other things in the environment.
Also, ocean currents would either change direction or just stop completely. This would change the temperature in some areas, and sea levels would significantly increase. This is because water expands slightly when it's heated. This increase could cause flooding in the areas with a low sea level, such as Florida.
Now, on the topic of removing greenhouse gases from the atmosphere, humans really focus on the production of CO2. Why, you may ask? Well, CO2 is a lot easier for us to remove because we produce it with basically everything we do, cars, industry, all that kind of stuff. So even though it's not really the most important greenhouse gas in the atmosphere, or it really doesn't have the most effect on global warming, it's a lot easier for us to alter and change and limit ourselves from producing it.
Other gases include water vapor and methane. Although these greenhouse gases have much more effect on global warming, they are much harder for us humans to alter.
One major way that we can really limit these fossil fuels, Adam, is we can create cleaner energy. This also helps us because that energy is going to be cheaper in the long run.
Another way is through stopping deforestation, because it removes trees that remove the CO2 from the atmosphere.
And even if we continue this deforestation, we really need to focus on planting trees that replace the deforested part, because we really need to get this CO2 out of the atmosphere, and getting rid of these trees is a very damaging thing.
So Marcel, can you tell me why the United States did not sign the Kyoto Treaty?
Well, one of the major factors here was that economists of the United States predicted that it would have a huge impact and devastating impact on the economy and our workforce, so that really scared us away from signing the treaty.
You know what? I also heard that it failed to require emission reductions from developing countries, around 81% of the population. So that was another big factor in not signing it.
Well, yeah, man, I wouldn't sign it if these countries don't have to do anything, That's just dumb.
Yeah.
So another thing we really need to protect is the ozone. Now, the ozone is a layer in the atmosphere that prevents about 95% of the sun's harmful UV rays of reaching us on Earth. The main chemical that depletes the ozone layer are CFCs.
You know what? I heard that chlorine molecules in CFCs break off and attack the ozone molecules. But do you know what they are used for?
Well, CFCs are mainly used for coolants in air conditioning and also for propellants and aerosol spray cans. They really are a useful chemical, and it was really revolutionary at the time of its creation.
Seasonal ozone depletion at the poles are mainly caused by CFCs also. In the winter at the poles, CFCs become stuck in ice crystals. When summer comes around, the CFCs are released into the atmosphere and are destroyed 40 to 50% of the ozone.